Let's just start a new one. I'm using the residential default. Residential default. Okay. And just to sort of keep it consistent, I'm just going to set up a floor and a wall and a table just so we can kind of see what's going on. Floor, architectural. I'll use that wooden floor because it's got a nice finish on it. Somewhere in there. WA for wall. Use the 4.5-inch partition. And then CM for component. I'm going to search here for table and pick this 60-inch diameter round dining table. Stick it in the middle somewhere. We might add to this model a little later, but it's good for now. So we really have two different kinds of views here. We have the orthographic views, which are just created with view, 3D view. The default 3D view is always given this name down here, 3D and sort of curly brackets. And if we get rid of that one, let me just delete it. If we delete it and go to 3D view, default 3D view, it'll create that view. Boom, whole new view. Let's crank it around. If after that you go view 3D view, it's not going to create a new one. It's going to take you back to this one. So if we go into a bunch of other stuff and wanted to come back to this one, it would bring us here. So really this means go to what's called the default 3D curly bracket view. And if there isn't one already, create one. Is what's going on there. So to set up more views with this tool, I'm going to rename the current curly bracket 3D view to something else. Rename to demo view or demonstration in 3D. When you create a new 3D view, Revit looks at the whole model, everything. If these had been extended a lot longer in different directions, it would have included them. It just grabs everything and puts it inside a new set of borders. That's almost always more than you ever want to show. So to reduce it down to the shape we want, let's say I want a square image. When I'm printing these, I'm going to drag these in so it's about square. And then I'll just use size crop to make it square instead of trying to drag it. It's up here at the top, size crop. And we can say I'm just going to make it 4 by 4 inches. 4 inches by 4 inches. That's how big it will print when placed on a sheet. Okay. Oh, oops. 4 inches. Okay. So if we just put this on a sheet right now, it's going to be 4 by 4 inches. I'm going to do that right away, just so right now it's really hard to tell what am I dealing with here. How big is that going to be? How big will that plot? That kind of stuff. So let's just go to a sheet. Sheets. They made just too many of them already for us. Look, we don't need any of this. Let's just go to first floor plan. That's easier. And it's already stuck our first floor plan view on there. You know, it has some things sort of built into this template. But let's drag this 3D view onto the sheet. You can do that just by clicking on its little icon here. When they're blue, that means they've been placed on a sheet already. So Revit's already sort of setting this up. And if it's white, it means it hasn't yet gone on a sheet. So I'm just going to drag this over here for right now. And realize that's pretty small. You know, I would like to get it sort of on the same size as the plan. I'm going to click the plan. I need to see its views, its crop boundaries. What we're trying to do here is to show in a 3D view what you want and how big you want it and from exactly what direction. You know, we should talk about something else. I realize we should talk about crop view and crop region visible. You know, when you come into a view, any view is going to be more or less like this. We're seeing the whole model, the whole universe of the model. But obviously, we only want to see a part of that when we're putting it on the page. And every view has a crop region. There's always a rectangular boundary for each of them. So to see what those borders are, we'll just say, let me see the edges of the crop region. So crop region visible. Let's say I drag these in down to where I think I want to see it. Like that, but nothing changed. I'm still seeing all that. I don't want to see these guys, except maybe for that little tiny bit in there. I don't want to see these guys. So I'll say, okay, now crop it. Just show me what's inside the view. You might well toggle these frequently as you go back and forth between how it looks when you're working on it, possibly, and how it's going to end up looking on the sheet. Maybe I'll just bring these in so all I'm showing is the view itself. Okay, and then if I go to my first floor plan, there's that little view. This residential default template has built into it views and sheets set up. It already has the first floor plan with nothing in it placed on this sheet. So now if I want to put these two together, oh, and then how do I know when I'm working in that view and when am I moving around on the sheet? Because we sort of have two ways of working with this. If I double click outside somewhere, or I'm not picking anything, then I can move all these around just like they're pieces of paper on a desk. You know, I can put my plan over here. I can move its view label over there. I can move the sheet somewhere else. All of those guys, Control Z. But I'll leave this somewhere near the middle and pick this up here. Now, I would like them to have about the same scale. The plan views all have a scale associated with them. If we printed this as a PDF and printed it full scale on the plotter, we could measure this, and every quarter inch we measured would stand for a foot. So this 6-foot diameter table would measure on the sheet of paper 1.5 inches across. 3D views never have a scale. And the reason is, well, in perspective views, you can see if a wall is this high at the edge of the drawing and this high in the middle of the drawing, there's no way you can set a scale to that. With these guys, orthographic views, when you first create that view, you probably can measure this and that, and there'll be some consistent scale, but we don't know what that is. And by the time, if I get in there, if I double click inside the drawing, then I can use Shift and the mouse wheel. And now I can't measure those because this guy right here is all of a sudden no length at all. It's been foreshortened. And at this point, the length of the wall has become nothing. People should never measure off a drawing anyhow.
Important dimensions should be explicit in the drawings,
because a lot of times they've been reduced slightly to fit on a printer, or the guy at Kinko's just didn't know what you wanted and just said, make it fit, and it ended up being enlarged or whatever. But if you want to get them more or less looking right, for these views, for the 3D orthographic views, we can set a scale. Let's say 1/4 inch equals a foot. I'll pick it here, sorry. 1/4 inch equals a foot. And it will increase so it looks approximately right. But this line right here, being somewhat foreshortened, is not the same as this line right here. Revit will never provide a scale for any 3D image, perspective, or orthographic. So what we're left here is we can make this any size we want. If we want that table bigger, just to really, let's say that this page is really about the table, we can move this down here and change the scale of this drawing up to 1 inch equals a foot. At which point we probably want to crop the boundaries and do that. But changing this with orthographic drawings, changing the scale is the only way to change the size of it. If you want that even bigger, so let's say you want, for some reason you've got this lined up, and we see that the view scale is 1 inch equals a foot, and 1.5 inches is too big. You want it somewhere in between there. Those aren't available to you in Revit directly. But if you notice, this guy, 1.5 inches equals a foot, They're also giving us its equivalent scale value. 1.5 inches goes into a foot 8 times.
1.5 inches to 12 inches is the same ratio as 1 to 8.
If we did measure this, whatever this is would be 1/8 of 6 feet. But we don't measure it because that's a bad thing to do. And we'll see that the 1 inch is 1 to 12. So we can, if we want, go into scale and go to custom. And one of them was 1 to 8 and one of them was 1 to 12. So we could say 1 to 10 here. And that would be somewhere in between those two. So it's sort of like being able to zoom, but you got to give it an actual number instead of being able to just zoom with the wheel. That's rarely going to be useful, but I just want you to know that it's available. For instance, if you wanted this table
to fill this whole page,
custom.
Well, the biggest we can get is 12 inch equals a foot, which is 1 to 1 or life size.
Okay, well that's full size. That's this is a 3-foot title block and this is 6 feet across. That's a little big. Maybe it's smaller than that. Maybe it's only half as big on the sheet as it is in real life. And there you can see, okay, there's what should be a 6-foot table. So maybe this has to, let's see, take it down to 3. No, that's too small. So I want it somewhere between 3 inch equals foot is the scale is 1 to 4. 6 inches equals foot is, okay, so I'll do my scale at 3, but halfway between 2 and 4. 3. Okay, so there's my table and its environments filling the page. That's the sort of reason that you would do that. But we still don't get a scale down here inserted by Revit. It's a 3D image. Okay, let's put this back somewhere normal. Let's say 1/4 inch equals a foot. Ooh, that's tiny. I guess yeah, it's the same. Right, it's the same. It just looks tiny, doesn't it? Let's take that up to a half just for fun. Okay. With any of these shapes, any of these views on the sheet will have a size crop option. All of these can be set to an actual size. I'm just going to make this one 4 by 4, just 4 inches by 4 inches, back where we started. 4 inches. Okay. This one over here, I can also size crop to, let's say, 8 inches by 8 inches, just for. As a rule, my plans, I tend to keep these pretty tight to the image, and I'll show you why. Even if I have size crop turned off for that view, I mean, show the visibility of it, having the lines of one view sort of overlapping the lines of another one, even if they're turned off, is confusing to me. So I end up trying to keep these all cropped in pretty close to whatever I'm trying to show, just so that they really don't overlap. Whether it's going to be turned on or turned off. And I think as a rule for 3D views, usually for 2D views, I decide not to show them, just so there's less confusing lines floating around, because sometimes you don't know if that line represents the sidewalk around the building or a roof line or something. Whereas with a 3D view, if you turn it off, it sort of goes off into space like that, and it's hard to tell just what's going on. So it's probably a good idea to have that turned visible. And you notice you can move a view title around by itself just to get it lined up the way you want it. But when you pick the view itself, it'll travel with it. So that's sort of a nice thing. You don't have to treat them as two separate objects. It is possible doing this to put the wrong label on the wrong drawing. Just let you know. So I pretty much always move them around with the let them go with the view until I'm ready to fine tune their position. We're mostly talking about rendering here. I mean, that's sort of where this is headed. And the only views you can render are 3D views. Let me make a perspective view here for a minute. Go back to our floor plan. View, 3D view, camera. We did this before. Here's that. Go back to my sheet. Oh, if I want to just put this view, this one view I just created, this 3D view 1 onto my A1 sheet, I don't have to go over here to do that. I can just grab it by its little icon there and then just drag it down onto that sheet, at which point that will open and I can stick it on there. Or I could have opened up this sheet and dragged it from here right over onto it.
Exact same result.
You'll notice that these two three-dimensional views, the orthographic and the perspective, are both listed here under 3D views. And 3D views are the only kind we can render in Revit, truly rendering in terms of light coming off a light source, coming down, bouncing on something, reflecting off a glass. None of the 2D views pay any attention to reflections or lights.
And by 2D views, I mean anything here in floor plans,
anything in ceiling plans, any elevations, any sections we create, or any callouts that we make from them. So ignoring that, the only ones we can render are the ones here in the 3D view category. And you'll be able to tell if you ever have a question when we're in the 3D view, the render icon. Sorry, I got carried away. You can only render back in the view itself, not in a view that's on a sheet. Okay, in a 3D view, render is available, and an orthographic view render is available. Go into floor plan. It's just not available. Can't do it. This is a function that doesn't work in any 2D environment. Now to talk about fine tuning an orthographic view. I'm going to stick mostly with orthographic for a while. About the only thing we can really do here. Well, actually, let's go over onto the sheet and activate this view because it's the same view. We can use our shift and then the middle mouse wheel to rotate around, to orbit is what that's called inside there, where the object stays mostly, the thing that we pick stays in the middle, or the thing that's in the middle stays in the middle. We have a couple of more options, but I can't just like move the camera sideways. I can't move the camera up and down. I can only shift W with the mouse buttons. I can only do this kind of operation, but I can't just move sideways without changing the relationship between the table and what's behind it. But we do have another tool that mostly works for the perspective views, but has some functionality here
in the orthographic views,
which is with Shift W. We looked at this a little bit last time. Shift W brings up this tool
called the full navigation wheel.
In ortho views, really only pan and up and down and look makes sense. But let's look at pan first. And the way you use these is you just press down on pan, and then it's an active tool until you release it. So that way you can just place that same camera angle sort of anywhere within that frame that you want, and then you let go. Look actually does much the same thing, but it seems to be a little faster, I guess, is what I would say. Important thing here is when I double click out here, I'm just sort of moving these things around just as like graphic design elements. I need to double click inside that view to make it the active view where any of these things are actually going to happen. Oh, here's my sofa. I want to see that from the other side. I want to see the other side of that sofa. So Shift W, 2 clicks, Shift W, orbit. I'll look around at the other side. Yeah, because the 3D view, when you set up the default 3D view, you don't have a choice of what direction you're looking from to start with. I mean, it's just sort of always looking from southeast looking down or something or other. And when you create a camera view, maybe your camera wasn't just in the right place to see what's going on, to show what you want to show, as opposed to what Revit imagines you want to show. If you haven't already, let's make a camera view looking from here this way. And that's view, 3D view camera. I'm going to put the camera out here. I can't see my camera position down here because I've got my crop boundaries turned on and nothing shows up outside those crop boundaries. So first I'm going to undo that. A lot of things to keep track of. 3D view camera. I'm going to start out here. If I go from here to here, yeah, that shows you what happens. Where my far clipping plane is set too close to the camera to show the whole thing. And to get rid of that and show the whole thing, you just uncheck far clip active and properties of that view, and they come back. So it's not like it's been erased or anything. It's just this guy toggling on and off. So when that happens to you, you'll know it. And especially true in a rendering sometimes. You might not even be able to see where that is, but it'll just be white out there instead of the sky, because that's as far as Revit's going to even look. Just stops there, and you have a white background instead of a sky background. In a camera view, let's get back into it out here in the model rather than on the page for right now. This is when the Shift W tools really start coming to be useful. Shift W. So as before, we can orbit, and that usually keeps the center of your sort of the centroid of mass of what you've described as the point that we revolve around. You see that where it says pivot? That point's always going to stay in the same place on the screen, regardless of what the rest of it's doing. If I use the center tool and drag it down onto, let's say, right here, that's going to change where the pivot is so that stays in the same place. So you can sort of pick what's important to you, put the pivot there, and then rotate it until the rest of it is the way you want it. Or I can pick center on the up here, and then orbit about that point. So we have orbit that we know, and then we also have a control over that. I'm going to change it back to the table or something. Okay. So that's orbit, and we know how that works. Shift W. Okay, it's the same tool, orbit and orbit. The look tool is a little different. The look tool, the camera is looking around just like this. It's on a tripod and it's just aiming in a different direction. It can look up, it can look down, but it's fixed in one place. The pan tool is where the camera moves from side to side. And this is actually the camera moving. You can see by the relationship between the table and the wall that the camera is actually in a different place from one end to the other of that transition. There's up and down. That's the camera just moving up and down. I don't find it very effective. It seems to be, I don't know what is setting its top and what's setting its bottom. Let me introduce you to rewind right now. With this, you can click on this and then work back through a whole slew of views till you get to the one that you accidentally got rid of. Walk is strange. Well, let me do zoom first. Zoom moves the camera along the current camera path. So right now I'm looking sort of down right here. Zoom is going to move me, bring the camera closer, but eventually I'm going to hit the floor, which doesn't seem to make sense, but that's just what this tool does. If I got out to there somewhere, I'd be hitting the floor. So the camera is both moving and making things bigger. I find that weird enough, and walk is also weird. Walk actually moves you through the space without changing the zoom factor of the lens. If you hold that down and very slow, yeah, that's what it does. Rewind. I never use this walk. Okay, do it very slowly. And if you get good at it, you can use this tool to actually walk through the space in real time. I guess you have to get like lower. But you can walk somewhere and then turn and then walk some more in the other direction and turn around. It's hard to see when we don't have a full floor plan to see what's going around the other sides. This zoom moves the camera. If you just want to increase the size of things on the screen, we have an option here. This little down arrow. You can click and get a whole bunch of more tools. But the only one I use much is increase or decrease focal length. And that's just like a zoom lens on a camera, where we pick it and then we can just zoom in and out like that. And the camera's not moving. We're just going from wide angle to telephoto. And that's really helpful when something is, you've got just the view you want, but it's not big enough on the screen. So you just use this to make it bigger. And there might even be a way to make a shortcut for that would be really handy. And then you hit escape to get out of there. Pretty much any of these that you want to get out of, you can hit escape. Let's say I want to make this a very tall wall. So this is a building we're looking at or something or other. We're used to seeing buildings converging when they go up. And this one looks like it's getting wider at the top. Just some weird camera angle, like where is the lens? I don't know. But if we want to make sure that we're truly looking up, over here in the properties of a camera view, we can say where our eye is above the floor plane and where the target that we're looking at is above the floor plane. Right now, these are reversed. We're sort of actually looking down. So we're getting a third vanishing point going down this way. If we want to be looking up, let's put our eye at 5 feet. And let's just say we're looking up at a point that's 25 feet. So that's more like the way that we'd set up a building if we're doing it that way. So you got some controls over here for those views, as well as in the Shift W controls. I should also point out that any of these 3D views can be switched between a perspective view and an orthographic view, just right over here. Projection mode, perspective. Let's change it to orthographic. Wink. So we can see we are truly looking up. If I rotate this around, so I'm looking pretty much straight, I can kick it back into perspective. And as you can see, that the camera is sort of very close to this corner, so it's big and large and coming towards us. You know, this is very close and these are very far. I'm going to go back to an earlier stage. Shift W, I'm going to rewind like a whole bunch back to some sort of normal view. Right there. Okay. So at this point, this camera has a location in space and it's still got a target point. It's gotten sort of messed up. I think I'm a lot closer to the corner than I want to be. I don't know what's going on here. Instead of creating a new view, I would like to be able to edit this just in plan of where these things are. So bearing in mind that this is 3D view 1, if I go camera view, it won't come back to this one. It'll make a new one called 3D view 2, 3D view 3, 3D view 4. You'll see them stacking up in your list here. If this is the view that I would like to change the camera point, let's say I want to bring it over to here and look this way, or just fine tune it one way or another. Remember the name 3D view 1. I'm going to go back to my first floor plan where I created it. Right click on 3D view 1. Actually, let's do this. Split my screen between the plan view and the 3D view. Get it? Make this my active view. Not there. I want to make this active. I can right click 3D view 1 over here in the project browser and say show camera. And then my camera shows up and my target point shows up. So if I want to move the camera over more towards the middle, I can just do that. If I rename the target point, I can do that. Just bring them back, get them where you want them. Let's see what happens if I do this, bring it real close. That's one of the perils of switching from an orthographic to a perspective view is the camera might be much closer than you think, and you get this totally distorted thing. And so you can use that same tool. This could be an elevation view, and I could be moving the camera up and down, for instance, or relocating it that way, which I hardly ever do. So now we're going to get back onto somewhat familiar territory. We had done this previously about setting the lights, but I would like to review it just as we go forward. I'm just talking about the sun at this point, moving the sun around. And what's a little confusing is that there's several different places you can set the sun settings for any given view, but they all do the same thing. Once you've done it in one place, you've done another. And let me just show you how it can be a couple of different ways. This is the long way. Properties, graphic display options, lighting, sun settings, and then do it here. We're trying to get to this sun settings dialog. We could get to it from down here, graphic display options, and then the same thing going on, lighting, sun setting, But the easiest way is just to type SU. That brings that right up. And what we're primarily doing with the sun settings dialog, we're locating the direction of that the sunlight is coming from. Rarely do we want to have this thing called relative to view set on if we're trying to really be analytical or show what a space is really going to look like. We really want this turned off. So now azimuth refers to how many degrees clockwise from north the sun is coming from. So 0, 90, 180. And the angle, the altitude is just the angle off the horizon, whatever it happens to be. For reference, in Louisville in the summertime, the sun is about 60 degrees at noon. It's as high as it ever gets around here. Obviously, at sunset, it goes down to 0. In the tropics, it would be straight up at noon. We've got these 4 options, which we looked at a little bit before, where you can set it not by us just picking a random number, but saying, okay, for a certain place at a certain time on a certain date, it will set the sun to that location. I only use that for real estate studies, like when somebody wants to see if the shadow of their building is going to be onto somebody else's solar panels or something. I'm always here just in lighting. And we'll set the azimuth. That would mean so 0, 90, 135. That would be the sun's coming in from this direction, 135, 35 degrees off. And that doesn't actually show up until you turn shadows on for a given location. And why the shadow isn't showing up for the table right now, I don't know. I'm not going to worry about it. I'll get into a 3D view and SU. And each view has its own settings. I'm just going to leave those the same. Y. Okay. And then turn them on here. Well, this is a little awkward, isn't it? I'm going to change this back to being a orthographic view, which is, I think, where it started out. You see that ground plane down there is a little awkward. It's getting cast down onto some sort of foundation plan. If we go into sun settings, we can say, do we even want this ground plane shadow to show up? Which we might as well, just so we can really see where the shadows of things are. So we'll keep it there, but we'll say move this up to the first floor level. So it'll be just coming out at the same level as the floor. And then we can see how that works like that. I'll make this 35 feet, maybe 10 feet. Okay, if we want really long shadows, like these shadows come all the way across the floor, I would just lower my sun angle. SU, let's say make it 15 degrees. Okay, and they go up onto the wall like that. And this is sort of what I was getting into with the chart over here, is there, we know about seeing this as a realistic view. If you want to just be previewing it. Oh, I should be in a 3D view. Sorry, let me get it's really in a 3D view. Perspective view. So that's quite a view. Let me go back to none. Graphic display options. Background. None. Okay. Background display options. Background. Sky. With a brown, a gray ground cover. So sort of the sky gets sort of lighter over in the direction that the sun is coming from. But otherwise, it's, it gets dark blue. Gradient, where it goes from the ground is all one color. Let's change this to dark green or something. And then the sky goes from robin's egg to so if I have these colors set up for gradient, we go from green, this whole thing is green. And then the sky goes from light at the horizon to darker at the top. Light to dark. But not very subtle, but powy zowie. So there was sky with the green. So, not so bad. We can mute this green a little bit. Take it down here more in the gray-green zone, which is a pretty good stand-in for a rendering, considering that it takes no time at all. And then image is just any image that we decide to pick, and it'll just fill the screen. Let's go to desktop and pick an image. Apply. So it's hard to get those to line up and look good just by putting image in here. I would certainly do that in some fashion where I could control those, combining images like that in Photoshop. Okay, let's go to sky. One thing I would like to show you in terms of locating the light sources. If we create another wall here and put a window in it, WN for window, just whatever this is. And the reason for being able to control the sun is, and this is what your next assignment will in part include, is maybe having the sun come in your kitchen windows, for instance. Right now the sun is coming this sort of from where we are, actually that way. If I want the sun coming in through the windows and across the table, get into a floor plan. I'll turn those lights off, just shadows off, just to toggle them. So here I'd like to set up a view that's looking, or actually I want my sun coming in here this way, 0, 90, 180, 270. I'll have it come straight in from these windows. So we'll get into our 3D view. SU, not relative to view. Azimuth 270, straight in from the west. And we'll start out being at that 35 degrees off the horizon. And again, I'll come back and say horizon at first, ground plane at first floor. Okay. And then I'll toggle cast shadows on. And we see what that looks like. Now, one thing that's a little weird about this is that there is a lot of light coming into this room, indirect lighting from the dome of the sky. So this isn't actually a good example of lighting a space, but it's a good indication of why you would want to be able to control the light coming into a space with the sun like that. And then when we get around to rendering something, which can be any 3D view, so it could be this one, RR for render. I don't try to think too far ahead what I'm going to get. I'll just render it once quickly and then take a look at it. We need 3 things for render. This is the bottom of page 8. We need a 3D view, either orthographic or perspective, and this one's orthographic. 3D objects, obviously we've got those. And at least one light source, and that's in this case the sun. We'll just use exterior sun only, like this is a picnic table or something rather. And then we got a couple of, let's hit render and see what our options are. And what this is doing now is rendering, this is an image that's 507 by 416 pixels on my screen. Yours will be different. And if we save it, it's just going to be that size. It's quite a small image, not something you'd want to blow up, bigger than that on a page. And we got a couple of decisions to make. And the first is quality. And you see where when we're looking at this classroom and the glass box next to it, we've got light from here, we've got light coming in. The light coming in from there is bouncing on the floor in the other classroom. It's bouncing up onto the ceiling of that room. It's bouncing on the wall. I've got some gleam on this wall where that's a slightly shiny paint. We can see multiple levels of reflection going on in here. All those are things that you'll start to pick up more and more of as the quality increases. So when I say draft, I really don't see any, I'm not sure we'll even see any reflections there, but I got really no differentiation in this wall from low to high. And a couple of things, you can see that it couldn't quite decide what to do with right here, so that we got some sort of pixelation going along here on the window, and the table's not very smooth. If we kick this up to medium and render, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, 5, 1,000. We can see that that's smoothed up a lot there. It's paying more attention to what each pixel has to be instead of sort of maybe taking 4 together and treating them as one. We're getting some reflections of the window frame in the top of the table. We're getting a little bit of gleam down here where light from the window is reflecting off the floor. I'll go to high, render. Takes longer. Anyway, it's just getting more and more, it's getting sharper and more subtle. Right. Rendering will let light bounce. Reflections, light from here hitting the wall, then hitting the floor and lighting the floor instead of just straight down. Instead of just sort of shining a ray at each pixel in the image and seeing what's there and what light is on it, it's like, what color is that light? Is that reflective or not? How shiny is the object? How bright is the light? Just more and more information about the subtleties of lighting. And then best is going to take longer. And I've got some illustration I could send out of this where we start seeing the reflections of the tables in these of the table in this window. But here it's 2% done and we're 15 seconds. So that's going to take 4 or 5 minutes to do. And generally, I'm going to stop it. Generally, it's worth it for your final renderings just to get all the subtlety out of them you can. But this is not a bad way to work, just in the non-rendered realistic style. Let me start a new perspective view. Do I have a good perspective view, or have they all just gone weird? It's a good one to look at backgrounds in the render dialog, RR. We also have some backgrounds. Whenever we're rendering, these are the ones that govern, not the ones that we set in graphic display options. So let's go to no clouds, medium, render. And we get that. We go to few clouds, render. We get a much more like cloud-looking sky, just a little bit of wispy stuff down here, and that varies along the horizon line. Get a couple. I'll skip up to cloudy. Cloudy. This might be a good one to see the quality changes. Do you see the reflections and stuff we have going on in here? Let's just change that to draft and render it and see how that works out. Yeah, it's sort of choppy, pixelated. I'll go back to medium and then pick very cloudy. So you get not very realistic, to tell you the truth, but there it is. Color, you just pick a color. Whammo, just what I have over there. Image and transparency we've sort of dealt with. So I think an important consideration we haven't done, I don't know how much attention we paid to it last time, was if we're doing quick test renders, it's entirely appropriate to do it to the screen. We just want to see, is the sun in the right place? Are the colors the ones I want? Is all the furniture that I want turned on? When you're talking about presenting it on a sheet of paper, however, to get good detail in these images without it being all pixelated, we would really like to have at least 150 dots per inch horizontally and vertically for this to be crisp. And it's going to be on like nice glossy paper, or for a magazine or something, you'd want 300 dots per inch. So if we wanted this image right here, let's just see how big it is. Size crop. Oh, this is humongous. We really like this image. Let me Let me say that this is the signature image of my project, and I want it this big on a sheet. 25 by 20. So that would pretty much fill up a title block. Let's make it even 25 by 20. Apply. Okay. So if I wanted to print this, render it, instead of putting to the screen where I'm only going to get 377 by 302 pixels, I want this to be 25 times 150 pixels by 20 times 150 pixels. So here I'm going to pick printer and say 150 dots per inch. And you can see this is much bigger. It's like 10 times as many pixels in each direction. So 100 times as many pixels. So 100 times as long to render for any given rendering system. Let me just click OK, 43 megabytes. And we'll wait till we get a time and a percentage. Oh, I tell you, it can go this fast because it's got that blue background on it. I'm going to stop this. Yeah, that's completely unreasonable. Let's take this back to cloudy and render it. It's a big image. But now instead of just being able to pick up blue pixel, it needs to, identical blue pixel, it has to calculate each of those sky pixels depending on how far it is from the sun and how far it is from top to bottom and that kind of stuff. This is actually pretty fast. I'm surprised. It doesn't have many transparencies or reflections to keep track of compared to especially an interior perspective. And when you're rendering to the printer, it doesn't matter what size it is, zoomed in or not on the screen, it's still going to be the same number of inches by the same number of pixels per inch. So this is taking about a minute to do that. Save the project. Sky. High quality. If you decided that this was too dark or too light, we looked at this last time a little bit, but sort of a little bit of fine tuning here if you don't want to do it in Photoshop, is we can make things, let's say I want to make the light things lighter and leave the dark things where they are. I could take this one up here will affect the whole image. This here will just make like the light things brighter. Light things brighter and not affect the dark ones, which is nice in terms of fine tuning, that kind of stuff. And you can change the color temperature from cooler to warmer. Well, that wasn't so bad. It's only 2 o'clock. We asked for elevations. You asked about elevations of things. Okay, well, let me just do that. Let me get my first floor plan. And let's say I have 3 of these. Control drag, control drag. And I want to give them different sizes. Let me go in and edit that table. Get into a plan view. Okay, diameter, I want to change to an instance parameter so that we can have a little table, bigger table. I don't want to change this to disk, just to my drawing. Okay, so there's the 6-inch diameter. Here'd be a 4-foot diameter, and here'd be a 8-foot diameter. So we want to see all 3 of those in their own separate views. There's 2 ways. The drawing comes with this elevation view, where you can go in and just see them together. Or if that was already being used or something, we can make copies of that. But let's see what another way to do that, which is to go to View, Elevation. And then elevation views like to look at the nearest wall from whatever direction it's coming from. Let's just place this here. just to get it in the right direction. And then we can move this whole guy out to here. And then if we pick this right there, we can then control what it's looking at. So we're controlling from this line, from one end to the other, and we won't even include the wall. We're just going to see that much. It's doing the whole project. So just bring it down to here. There's that. We can turn crop region visible off, and there's that little guy ready to go. And we could give this, you know, whatever scale you wanted. So once you've got that, we can then just copy, control drag this over to here. So this is the indicator of it, and then we also have to drag its actual view over. There's the bigger table. Can I just drag both of those together? Okay, if you drag them both together, you get the whole thing. So it takes a little playing with. And that just created elevation, these three right here. So I'll go over to my sheet and drag them like that, labeled however you need. And I think we don't really need this. We don't really need to see that. Right click, hide in view element. Because these might end up being on the fourth floor. And click out there. So that's sort of where that goes. I don't know if I did everything in just the order that I was looking on, but I think I hit all the highlights.